there, welcome to Inkquiring Minds. My name is Doug and I'm back with another Pen Resurrection Sunday video. Before we begin to resurrect another fountain pen, I have to give a shout out to my pen friend and fellow Calgary Pen Club member Peter, because he saved my bacon for this resurrection. I was going to resurrect this circa 1961 Sheaffer Imperial II with the Triumph conical nib, and I was having real difficulty. And I really needed a pen resurrection this week that only took 1 or 2 days, because I'm tied up with social activities for the rest of the week, I know. I'd rather be playing with my pens than dealing with real people, but you know, us pen people have to get out of the basement sometime. So I needed a pen resurrection that would only take a couple of days. And I picked this one because Sheaffer touchdowns are fairly easy to unscrew and repair. I had this one all in pieces. I had the conical nib off like that. And there's a bit of a wow in there. I thought that would be the biggest thing, is to be able to fix this nib. I actually did a close-up magnification of that nib, and I'm actually looking forward to trying to fix this nib. It's going to take some time, but the thing that stymied me and stopped me in my tracks was this Sac Protector on the touchdown filler will not come off no matter what I do. That's pretty much dead in the water. So I started thinking about, well, what other fountain pen can I resurrect that might only take a couple of days? And I went to my pen club meeting yesterday and met with my pen friend Peter and others. And he had just come back from Brazil, where he had picked this up at an auction. This is another Sheaffer Imperial II. This one's from about 1964. The 61, roughly 61, has this kind of a cap, with that kind of a cap band tapering gold, and it has Sheaffers with the possessive S on it. They dropped Sheaffers with the possessive S on their pens in 1964. This one just has a stylized S and Sheaffer on it, but it is a conical nib, Triumph nib, touchdown filler, and I thought, oh, I was all geared up to do one of these, and Peter gave me this to resurrect. So thank you, Peter. You saved my bacon this week, and we're going to go after this pen, and hopefully it doesn't throw me any curves that will take longer than a couple of days to fix. Otherwise, next Sunday, you'll have no pen resurrection from me. Let's take a look at this pen. It's really got the slimline pen for men, PFM kind of vibe going for it. Here is a Sheaffer pen for men from 1960. And you can see it has the same kind of thing happening style-wise. The same kind of clip, the same square to round cap, and square to round barrel. The PFM has a gold accent on the bottom finial, and the PFM has a 14 karat gold inlaid nib and is a snorkel. But the same kind of vibe going on here. Of course, the touchdown filler, you unscrew, pull out the sleeve, put the pen in the ink and push down, and that sleeve compresses the sac inside the Sac Protector. When the touchdown sleeve reaches that little groove right there, it relieves the pressure that was built up, and the sac inflates inside the Sac Protector, and the nib and feed suck up ink. Everything seems to work okay. The pen has what feels like a flexible sac inside there, so it's not all desiccated and hard, but it's not sucking up any ink, which might mean that we need a new seal on the inside of that sleeve. There's an O-ring inside there. And let's take a close-up on this conical Triumph nib. You can see that it just says Sheaffers, and it's interesting that the cap has Sheaffer, but the nib has Sheaffers, because the barrel here has that same stylized S and Sheaffer without the possessive S. At first blush, I think that this cap and pen do belong together, and what they have here is a Triumph nib from stock. They were probably phasing out the Triumph nib for the Imperial, which you find on the Targa and other Imperials, and so they weren't going to restamp these with the new Sheaffer name rather than Sheaffers. There's lots of wear on the resin plastic, no deep bite marks, and that nib, well, seems to need some work. I did some magnification work on this to show that nib is slightly splayed out. So someone's pressed on it hard, and so it looks slightly sprung, but we'll see. That classic upturn on the Sheaffer nib is normal. They felt that that gave the nib a better sweet spot. You'll see that the PFM has the same thing happening with the upswept nib. So the first thing I'm going to do with this pen is to put it into the ultrasonic bath with some pen flush, which is 90% distilled water and 10% ammonia. Get out all the old ink, and then we'll try to remove that section and nib with a little bit of heat. There's some glue right there, and then see whether we can get this sac protector off. If I can't get this one off, it means I'm going to be resurrecting a different pen this Sunday. So let's put everything in the bath and see how it comes out. There we go. So there's the section coming off. There's the feed and the clutch ring. Yeah, it doesn't move on there. And now let's see if we can get that conical nib to come off. And it's going to require a little heat. There we go. That took a little bit more heat. And put the sac protector back on again to give it more leverage. And there's the nib coming off, the section coming off. Oh, geez. It solidified again while I was talking. There, not so much talking this time. And there's our conical nib. It always had a bit of adhesive attached to it. I don't know exactly what the company used, but it was shellac-like. Has a relatively low melting temperature. Same thing with the section hood. And now we should be able to push the feed right out of there. And there's our ebonite feed unit with the seal, which is in really good shape. These generally don't get much wear because it doesn't move. So we'll put that section aside, put the nib aside, and the feed, and we'll see whether we can get this sac protector off of here. But the later ones just sort of had a crimp in it, and I can't see a crimp in this one anywhere. So I'm hoping that that is just sealed on there with some glue, and I can heat that off. Yeah, that does not want to budge. Okay, I'm going to have to work on this off camera. I've got the clutch ring off anyway. Okay, well, after a lot of heat, I finally got it off. It's not screwed on at all. It's just pressure fit, and you can see that there has been shellac applied. Certainly that the sac itself has been shellacked to that nipple, but there was shellac applied right there to the sac protector as well. Made it difficult to get it off. That being said, this sac is in excellent condition, so this is recently renewed. So I'm just going to put this back together again. I don't think we need to. I'm just going to leave it like that. I don't think we need to replace that sac in there. Maybe I'll put some talc on there to make it slide easier. When I put it back in, you can see it's crimping a bit. So we'll put that aside, and we'll focus on this nib. So as I said before, I used my digital microscope to take a look at those tines, and it looks like they're slightly separated, slightly splayed, and that nib slit is full of gunk. And now, of course, I've had it in the pen flush. It looks like it's free and clear. Now I'll put my digital microscope on that again, and we'll take a look at it here. So I'm just going to put this up to the light here, and you can see that nib slit is quite wide. So I'm worried that it's a little bit too wide, and so I'm going to do a little work on that to try to get that gap smaller first, and then we'll put the whole thing back together again and do a dip test. But before we do that, let's take a look at this barrel and touchdown sleeve. I'm going to get a slim slot screwdriver, say that 10 times fast, and run it down the barrel. There's a slot screw at the end, and we unscrew that screw. There we go. Whoop. This one seems to be a little bit tight. This does not want to let go. Sometimes these blind caps are a little rusty. There, finally. It was locked in there tight. And there's the screw. Comes out. So kind of shape it in. It's in pretty good shape. Then the touchdown sleeve can come right out. And now we have all our component pieces of the Sheaffer Imperial II. We have the barrel and the blind cap. We have the sac protector, the sac, and the section collar. We have the section, the slot screw that holds the blind cap, and the touchdown sleeve together, the feed, the clutch ring, the feed O-ring seal, and the nib itself. So when you have this many small parts, it behooves us, there's a word for today, behooves, to put all the tiny parts together in one place where we don't lose them. Doug, he says to himself, because he's done this before. So all the tiny parts in one spot. And I'm going to work on that Triumph nib to see whether I can get it in a workable condition, and then we'll clean all these parts, put it all back together again, and do a dip test on it. But the main part of the whole idea of the touchdown is that compression. When the touchdown tube goes down over top of the sac protector, it creates a compression, squeezes the sac, and then releases that pressure, and the sac inflates. And all that comes down to that seal right there. That's an original touchdown Sheaffer seal in there, and that O-ring needs to be replaced. The sac looks like it's in really good condition, so I'm going to keep that. I'm going to go to my touchdown repair kit from 15 pens, and I'm going to get out one of the O-rings. There's 3 of them in there. There should be 3 in there. Oh, I used one already. I've done this before. Tease out one of those O-rings, and that O-ring goes right inside there. So we have to hook that old one out, make sure everything is clear of any debris and old shellac and stuff, keep it nice and clean, and then a lot of silicone grease on that O-ring and replace it inside that barrel. These touchdown sacs are slightly thinner than regular sacs. They're number 15 size, and you trim them to length. And the reason that they're thin wall is so that they will compress easier in the pen. Now I'll get out my dental hook here, and I'll put my optical eyes on so I can see what the hell I'm doing. Pardon me as I speak into my mic. And see whether we can tease this old O-ring out of here. It's rather flat. It certainly wasn't making a compression in here, so I got a feeling this is all desiccated. Yeah, it's all turned to putty, and it's breaking apart pretty easily. And there it is. There's the original seal. They were this beige color, and you can see how easily it broke apart. Yeah, it's pretty much done. Toast. It isn't supposed to be glued in at all, but I'm just checking to make sure that those threads are clear of any debris, and I'm going to brush it out with my test tube cleaning brush to make sure it's nice and clean and get all that old debris out of there. Okay, so now let's put this O-ring into this barrel. I've scraped out that barrel so it's nice and clean all the way around, and the other end as well had a lot of old shellac on it, so it's looking pretty good now. The other thing we have to make sure of is that this little hole where the air escapes is clear and free of debris. Small needle for that, and it seems to be in good shape, completely clear of debris. And we have some silicone grease, and we're just going to coat that O-ring with silicone grease. And this becomes a bit of a greased pig contest to see whether we can get this slippery little thing into that slippery little slot. So this might take an hour, this might take 2 seconds. Sometimes having a light down the other end of the barrel really helps. Okay, I have to do this off camera. And I did it. Well, that took a while. I worked on it for about 15 minutes and found that it was the wrong size O-ring. So the O-ring that was in my kit was obviously, I've put that in there by accident. That is an O-ring for a PFM sized snorkel pen. So I used the second one that was in there and got it into the slot with lots of silicone grease, and now that touchdown sleeve should slide down inside there. Yeah, that seems to be a good fit, and that's all sliding nicely. Let's get the screw back out again and the blind cap, and put the screw down inside. There, it takes a few tries to get it screw thread down, and that seal is really tight, and I can hardly get that blind cap off there, so that doesn't need to be replaced. They're difficult to get anyway. Tighten that down nicely. So much grease on my hands I can't turn anything. There we go. Yeah, so I put that up to my lip and pull on it, and I can feel it sucking my lip, and you might be able to hear it go hiss when it gets past that spot right there. So that part is done. Now I'm going to tackle that nib. And there's the nib all polished up. And my buffer tool looks great, two-tone nib. I've reduced that gap a little bit, and I've got it aligned pretty well. So I think I'll put the pen back together again now and give it a dip test and see whether I can adjust it once it's back together. But before I do that, I think I'm going to polish this section, because once I've got the whole thing back together again, I don't think I want to take it apart again. So let's polish that first. Won't take any time and save us a step. And there's the section all polished up. I didn't use any micro mesh on it because it was in really good shape. No gouges or anything like that I needed to sand out. So I just put my polishing compound, which is my Meguiar's Scratch X number 2, and then used my fine cut Anderson pens micro gloss number 1, again on my Dremel polishing tool, and buffed it to a high luster. It's gorgeous. So we're going to take the feed and the seal, put the seal on that feed, and then put it in through the section, and then just poke that seal down there to make sure it's seated. And then we're going to screw the Triumph nib down on top. It's a single thread, so it should go on only in one direction and end up in the right place. There we go. Ended up in the perfect place. There, dead on perfect. And make sure that clutch ring goes on over top of that section thread unit. And for the purposes of this test, I'm not going to put the Sac Protector on because I'm not going to try to engage the touchdown system. I just want to dip test that nib. Screw that down, and just going to slip this barrel on it. And now I can do a dip test, get out some paper and see how that nib writes. Get out some Waterman's here, dip the nib just enough to get that feed wet as well. And let's see what we have. Let's call this a 1964 Sheaffer Imperial II, and it is way too wet, and it is scratchy that way, not so much that way. So I need to do a little bit more work closing those tines, and that's one of the reasons that it's scratchy, because it's catching the inside edges of that nib as well. So I'll go at that nib again and come back and see whether I can get better results. And this is what happens when you work with vintage pens. Trying to tighten that gap in there, and that tine just snapped right off. Right there at the gold. So, I think I might try to resurrect this nib and put it on this pen. That's going to be quite a thick stub if I try to cut that off right there at the feed. It might be an interesting experiment anyway. And here we go. It's now a stub. I polished it up, and it looks very nice. I cut it off with my nail clippers and knocked off the edges and made it into a smooth stub nib. It's 0.25 millimeters in the horizontal, and it is 0.9 millimeters in the vertical, which makes for some nice wet line variation in a very wet and I think stylish stub nib. So I had to grind down the feed as well because it sticks out a little bit, so I ground down that feed so that it wouldn't interfere with the page when you're writing. Well, I'm going to call that a semi-success. And I'm going to put the rest of the pen back together again and see whether the rest of the pen is a success as well. I felt like I got some suction out of this, so I'm hoping it's going to draw up some ink. So let's give that a try. So this Sac Protector is just press fit on here. There we go. Make sure we don't lose that clutch ring. It goes right there, like that. And then we put the feed into the touchdown unit. Give that a twist. I'm not going to cement that down just yet. I want to make sure everything works properly first. Drop a little bit of silicone oil on that Sac Protector just so that it will slide nicely around the touchdown tube. We can lock that down. Ah, you hear that? Okay, let's measure this pen. We have 10.05, press tear, get out the Watermans again, touchdown tube up, dip the nib in. I hear bubbles, let it expand, leaving the nib in there. I'm just going to give it a second stroke. Should be a one-stroke filler, but I didn't hear any bubbles that time. Let's give it a try. Cross our fingers. 0.77.8 milliliters of ink. That's pretty typical. Those sacks inside the touchdowns are slender, and they don't take more than 0.8 or 0.9 milliliters of ink. And we have at it again. Very, very wet pen. Yeah, that's almost too much. It's writing really smoothly. I don't know that you can write with this. It's just so big and wet. I'm going to write with it for a while. We'll see whether it's actually a viable fountain pen or not. And I might give fixing this nib a try and see whether maybe if I fix that nib I can swap it onto this pen. They're identical nibs. And we'll give that a try and see how it writes. And we'll choose the best of the two. Someone's going to have to be sacrificed.
Sacrifice? They're going to make a sacrifice to the volcano, and I'm the only virgin on this boat! No, I don't care if you found Jesus. What happened before still counts.
In the meantime, I'm going to polish up that barrel and get it as shiny as the section, and then we'll go after the cap as well. So it's day 2, and here is an update. I got the stub nib all polished up and writing actually very nicely. It's still quite wet, but it's writing like a paintbrush. And then I took the nib from this pen and put it on the restored pen and worked on that nib as well, and I got it writing. It's not a thing of beauty to look at. I haven't polished it yet, but I worked for about an hour on that nib to get it to write, and it writes a fine smooth line, and it looks really gnarly but it actually writes. So I'm going to take this nib and I'm going to put it on this pen, but this pen wasn't going to work because I couldn't get the Sac Protector off. Well, I worked for quite a while until like 2 o'clock this morning trying to get this thing off of here, and finally what I did was I took a piece of clothes hanger, wire clothes hanger, cut it off and pushed it through the sack and everything down through this way, and grabbed onto it with some gripper material and just hammered it through, and it pounded that section unit out. And I've cleaned all of the old remnants of sack off it, and I found why it was so stuck in there so badly. And it wasn't that there was some shellac on there, which is normal, but here is the sack that was in the pen. The back end, where you could push it through that hole, was all soft and pliable. But here is the front end that was stuck inside the Sac Protector, and it is hard as rock, as you can see. And I took the blind cap off and replaced the O-ring inside the barrel, so I've got a really good, that is sucking on my lip right now, so that's got some really good vacuum seal to it. So we're going to resack this touchdown and put that Sac Protector back on. I'm going to soak all these bits. I'll save that nib for this pen here. We're going to polish this Sheaffer Imperial II up. This is from about 1960 to 1964 because it still has the Sheaffer's S, Sheaffer's Possessive, on the clip, but there's lots of scratching and age and wear on all of these bits. So I'm going to soak everything. I'm going to go at it with some, this is going to require some sanding. There's a bite mark there, one there. So I'm going to sand and polish those out with some 400 grit sandpaper and then go through the micromesh and then polishing compound. Get all those bits looking great. So here's a number 15 size thin wall sack that goes inside the sac protector on the touchdowns, and the section unit will go right up to about there. So that means the sack will go to just about halfway up this collar when it's all the way in the barrel of the sac protector. So it needs to be trimmed to about there and then trim it off. That looks about right. Yep, just about perfect. And I'm going to get a little bit of talc. We don't want that sack sticking to the inside of that sac protector. It slides in okay, but when it sticks, it starts to solidify, as we saw in this petrified sack here. Just for longevity purposes, let's just coat this sack in a light coating of pure talc. And we'll get our sack spreader out and our shellac brush from the inky nib and paint a little bit of shellac just on that nipple all the way around and slip it up under and give it a slight twist. I just like to add a bead of shellac just around that seam just to seal it from any leaks in the future. And we'll let that dry for several hours before we put it inside the sac protector. And that's just friction fit. I'm just going to pop that right on there and press it down. And while we're letting that dry, we're going to go after polishing the rest of the pen. So I was getting these parts ready to polish, and I was inspecting it with my inspection loupe, and very, very faintly, I don't know whether you can see this on camera or not, but this has an imprint that's very faint and says Sheaffer's RD 1960, made in Canada, right there. Very, very faint. So as I polish this, I might lose that imprint. It's very, very faint. I'll try not to, but we'll see. So here we are, all polished up. There's the cap looking like brand new. Beautiful. Same thing with the barrel. The blind cap had a few chew marks in it, and they are gone. And that imprint is still there, right there. Maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. But it's looking pretty good. So let's put this back together again. Put the clutch on the section. It sits down inside like that. Put the seal on the feed. Put the feed into, without it breaking, into the section unit and the touchdown. And then we'll have to keep twisting this around to get this nib oriented correctly. Here's the gnarly nib that I polished up. I'm taking it off that pen, and we're going to put it back on where it belongs. And we put the section on, tighten it down. There we go. Give the nib a turn. See where it ends up. It's about 80 degrees, 85 degrees off. So we need it to line up right about there. So I'm going to put my thumb there. And just like doing a Parker 51, turn that feed around so it's relatively aligned with my thumb. We'll try again. Pretty good. There we go. Now our pen is done. 1960 Sheaffer Imperial II and a 1964 Sheaffer Imperial II. This one has a custom-made stub nib on it now, and this one has a custom gnarly nib. Bent out of shape, now bent back into shape, and it actually writes. So I'm going to fill this pen up here and see how much ink we can get in there to see whether that seal was correct or not on that touchdown filler. I hear a bit of a psst, so I'm hoping that'll fill with ink. Let's measure the pen first. 10.13 pressed hair. It's a one-stroke filler. I'll probably give it a couple of strokes just to be sure. And when I lift it out and go back down again, I keep the nib down in the ink. Yeah, not a terrific amount. 0.65, not as much as this one. This one I got up to almost 0.8, but it shows that that touchdown filler is filling. I'll try it a third time. Let's see whether a third time's the charm. A little bit more, not much more. And there we have two Sheaffer Imperial IIs from the 1960s, roughly restored back to life again. They're actually writing and they're looking pretty good. I'd call that a success after a whole bunch of failure. And I'll come right back with my thoughts on this resurrection. So what are my thoughts about this resurrection? Well, these two resurrections. First of all, thanks, Peter, very much for the gift of this beautiful 1964 Sheaffer Imperial II. I'm sorry I broke the nib, but them's the breaks. Haha. I'm actually very happy that I got it to write at all. You can see that it's writing a very wet, thick paintbrush kind of a line, but that makes it an interesting pen. And doesn't it look great? That gold, you know, when they made these things back in the 1960s, 1950s, so forth, these gold-filled caps and stuff, they just polish up like they're brand new. And that plastic polished up beautifully. And it doesn't look too bad, actually, for being cut off. And the pen is beautifully balanced in the hand and posts amazingly. This is the one that surprised me because I was ready to give up on this pen, and I did give up on it when I got this pen from Peter, and I decided to use this one for parts. But after I had fixed this one and then broke it and then fixed it again, I decided to stay up late the other night and give it another try to see whether, first off, if I could get that touchdown filler apart, which I eventually did. I had to pound it apart with a hammer, but also to see whether I could fix that nib. And that took a lot of effort. I spent about an hour tweaking and pushing and prodding and expecting that nib to explode on me any second like the other one did. But it looks horrible in its gnarly little twist, but it writes a beautiful, wet, smooth, fine line now. So very definitely two pen cadavers here that have been resurrected from the dead. They're too finicky at this point for me to consider selling them, but I'm going to keep them around and write with them, take them out to my pen club meetings and see what people think of them, and see whether I can calm this pen down, because it just writes like a fire hose. And there you have it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to get instant notifications whenever a new video is posted. And you can join as a member of my channel for only 99 cents a month, and I guarantee I'll answer your comments in the comment section, and you'll get cool emojis, badges, sneak peek unboxing videos, as well as instant access to my videos the moment I post them. And that just leaves it for me to say, fingers crossed, thank you for watching. Look at that. And that's all she wrote.
I made this.